This is the first of several tutorials that I will demonstrate how to create the sock yarn blanket created by Shelly Kang. This is a free pattern that you can get on her blog, which you can find at www.shellykang.com. That's SHELLYKANG.com. And she has all the information on how to do this on her website, but I've had several people ask for me to demonstrate how to do this. And on her website there is a link on the side border, on the right side border, all about the blankie that you can click on to learn about how to do this. In this first tutorial, I will be showing you how to cast on your square with the provisional cast-on and complete the first square. Future videos will show the joining of the squares, weaving in the ends, and then the I-cord border, which is this border here. This project is great for leftover sock yarn. It's for mostly I'm using fingering weight, but you can use any weight yarn as long as you stay consistent throughout the whole blanket. If you start with fingering weight, you're going to want to stick with fingering weight. If you start with DK or worsted or whatnot, you're going to want to stick with those weights of yarn. I am using a US size 1 needle, and which is what's called for in the pattern that's written by the designer. And I use a circular. This is a 9-inch circular needle, and the main reason that I use a circular needle is because I like to use metal or nickel plated or what have you, the type of needles, and instead of bamboo. I originally started this on bamboo double points, but I like the metal needles better, and I couldn't find any metal double points that I was really happy with, so that's why I chose to go with a small circular needle. Now, you may decide you like a different size needle than a size 1. I liked the fabric that I was getting with the size 1, so that's what I stuck with. If you are a tight knitter, you may want to go up to a size 2 or a 3. Or if you're a loose knitter and you like a tight weave fabric, then you may want to even go down to a 0. You will have to just do a square and determine how you like the fabric. If you like the fabric with the square that you make, then go ahead and stick with the size 1 or adjust your needle as necessary. Other than the size of the needle that you want to start with, you need to decide how big you want your squares to be. Now, I have chosen to do mine with 31 stitches. You can make your squares any size you like. Sometimes people like to go to 41, or I don't know if I would go smaller, but you can choose any number of stitches to cast on as long as it is an odd number of stitches. So let's go ahead and get started with the provisional cast on. Now, understand that if you do not want to put the I-cord border on your blanket, as I have done here, then it is not necessary for you to do a provisional cast on. Or you can do the I-cord border or any other type of border, but again, if you're not interested in having a border on your blanket, you can just go ahead and cast on using your favorite cast on method, as long as you make the cast on loose. But if you are planning on putting the I-cord border on, as I have done here, then to make it easier to pick up your stitches to work with, we're going to do the provisional cast on here. Okay, so for this tutorial, I already told you what size needles I use for my blanket, but for this tutorial, I'm going to use larger needles and a larger gauge yarn so that you can see the stitches a little bit better. I'm also going to use just a plain piece of fingering weight yarn as my waist yarn. You can use crochet cotton or another type of yarn, just something that's slightly lighter weight than what you're using for your working yarn. I'm also only going to cast on 21 stitches just to make the square a little bit quicker to go through. If you're using a worsted weight yarn for your blanket, you may decide that you want to cast on less stitches as well for your square. So what we're going to do is I have taken a slip knot and I've put it around 2 needles here. And I'm going to create my stitches by going around this piece of waste yarn. And how we're going to do that is we're going to go under and grab it, and then over and grab it, and then under and grab it, and then over and grab it. And you're going to continue until you have the required number of stitches on your needles. Making sure that the waste yarn stays on the bottom. If you happen to accidentally get it on the top somehow or wrapped around your needles, then you have done it incorrectly, and you need to make sure that it stays right there on the bottom, that it does not wrap around your needles at all. So you're going to keep doing that until you have the correct number of stitches. And like I said, I'm going to cast on 21 stitches for this particular square. Okay, so now that I have my 21 stitches here, I can take out one of my needles. It doesn't really matter which one you take out. And I'm going to turn the work so that I can start working it. But I am going to hang on to my my waste yarn just to keep it out of the way and to make sure that I don't lose that little loop that's across the stitch right there. And this first row, you are just going to knit all of your stitches on this first row. All the way across to the end, and the last stitch we're going to knit through the back loop, and we're going to turn the work. And now we are ready to do our first row of decreases. We're going to do a double decrease. Now what you're going to do is you're going to slip the first stitch as if to purl the stitch. You're going to have the yarn in the front, and you're just going to slip that stitch off the needle, slip the stitch off the needle as if to purl, and then move the yarn to the back. And then you're going to knit 13 stitches. This will take you to the center 3 stitches. Actually, I'm not going to knit 13 because I only cast on 21. So I'm going to find my center here. So because I only cast on 21 stitches, I slip the first stitch and then I knit 8. And then I should have the same number of stitches. If I don't include those 3 stitches, I should have the same number of stitches on the other side. Yes. Okay. So now I'm going to do my double decrease, and the double decrease is done by slipping 2 stitches as if to knit them together, and then knitting the next stitch, and then slipping the 2 stitches that you slipped over top of the other one. So you're going to pass those 2 stitches over, okay? And then you're going to knit to the end, and at the end on the last stitch you're going to knit through the back loop. Knit through the back loop and turn. And then on the back side you're going to knit all the stitches, but you're still going to slip that first stitch as if to purl it. So the yarn is in the front, you're going to slip the stitch, and then you're going to bring the yarn to the back, and you're going to knit across all of these stitches. And then when you get to the end for the last stitch, you're going to knit that stitch through the back loop. And you're going to do this on every row. You're going to slip the first stitch as if to purl and knit the last stitch through the back loop on every row, whether it's a decrease row or a straight knit row. And what that is going to do for you is it's going to give you a nice edge where when you're picking up your stitches for your future squares, it makes it easy for you to pick up those stitches. So again, we're going to knit that last stitch through the back loop, and we're going to turn. And now we are on a decrease row again. And again, Shelly has all of this information on her website, on her blog, so if you're getting a little confused or anything like that, you can always go over there and read the information from her blog. So we're going to do another decrease row here. You're going to slip the first stitch as if to purl and bring that yarn to the back. Now I did not purl that stitch, I just moved that yarn to the back. You're going to knit to the center 3, and in this case it's going to be 7 stitches. It's always going to be 1 stitch less than the previous row. And if you look at your work, you'll be able to see that here is my decrease from before, right there, and then you're going to follow it up, and the next decrease is going to be encompassing those center 3 stitches. And again, if you want to double check, you can make sure that you have the same number of stitches. Don't include those 3 stitches, but count the stitches on this side, not including the center 3, and then count the stitches on this side, and you should have the same number of stitches. Then we're going to slip 2 stitches as if to knit them together. We're going to knit the next stitch, and then we're going to pass those slip stitches over the knit stitch. And you can see how that lays, and all your double decreases will line up right over top of one another. And then you will knit to the end of the row, always knitting that last stitch through the back loop. And again, once we get this square finished, you'll be able to see the edge a little bit better and see how it's going to give you that nice clean edge for picking up those stitches. Okay, so now we're going to slip the stitch again, always slip that first stitch, and knit across. This is a plain knit row. So you have 1 knit row and then 1 decrease row. And then a knit row and a decrease row. And you continue in this fashion until you have no stitches left. And this forms a square when you're done. So again, the last stitch, we're going to knit through the back loop and turn. The yarn in front, with the yarn in front, slip the stitch and bring the yarn to the back, and then knit to the center 3. I always like to get familiar with how to read my knitting, so I don't have to keep counting and remembering how many stitches I was supposed to knit to get to the center 3. But if you look at your knitting, you see here is my stitches right here, and so this is my center stitch. So the center decrease is going to be these 3 stitches. So I just have to look at my knitting to figure out where that is to see, so I don't have to keep counting every single row. So again, we're going to slip as if to knit 2 together. We're going to knit the next stitch, and then we're going to pass those 2 slipped stitches over top of the knit stitch. And then we're going to knit to the end. And again, always knitting that last stitch through the back loop. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up this square, and then I'll come back and show you the finished product. Okay, so here's my finished square. It kind of looks a little wonky, but once you get more stitches or more squares attached to it, it'll start to look nicer. And this is, again, with worsted weight yarn. If you look at my sock yarn blanket, these squares are a little bit more dense, and that's why I like the sock yarn blanket much better. Oops. But I did this one in the worsted just to give you, make it a little quicker to get through and to be able to show you these stitches. Also, if you look at the side, you see that nice chain along the side? This is where we're going to pick up stitches for our next square. Now, if you want to have your blanket with the zigzag like I have here, then you will need the number of stitches that you want, or number of squares that you want across your blanket cast on, or in this fashion with your provisional cast on, if you're going to do the I-cord border. So you have to have 2 squares in order to cast on the next square, because you're going to take some stitches from this side and some stitches from this side to cast on this square. So what you need to do between now and the next time is to get at least 2 squares, if not more. I think I have 25 squares across the bottom of my blanket for one row. So you'll need to have at least 2 to do the zigzag. Now, if you decide you do not want a zigzag edge to your blanket, then you can cast on your squares a little differently. You can start with 1 square and then add another square here, and then another square here, and then add another square, and then keep going from there. So you will have a straight edge. I will show you both ways of casting on and how to build your blanket. But for now, you have the 1 square, and the next time we will do joining of the squares. I also want to mention that there are, at the time of this recording, there are almost 2,500 projects with this blanket in Ravelry. And I highly recommend that you go and check out some of the projects that have been completed, because there are so many different ways to do this. I have seen blankets that have like a stained glass effect where they have black in between each square, all sorts of different things that people do. I've seen where instead of having 4 squares, they've cast on along 2 squares and did 1 large square. There's so many different ways that you can do this. So go and check out the projects on Ravelry to see what you might want to incorporate in your blanket. So until next time, my name is Tina, also known as Bloomingknitter, and you can contact me on Ravelry as Bloomingknitter, or you can email me at bloomingknitter@gmail.com. Thanks so much for watching. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. I really love this project. I'm going to show you my full blanket as it is. It's still a work in progress. But this is going to be one of those projects that are in progress for a long, long time. I am really enjoying doing it. I do a square every now and again, and I have so much scrap sock yarn. Now, when I first started this blanket, I joined a bunch of swaps to get little mini skeins of sock yarn. And you too can join these swaps. I'm sure they still run them. It's over. There's a I think it's called Sock Yarn Blankie group on Ravelry, and they just do swaps for mini skeins. They're usually about 5 grams, and you can usually get 1 to 2 squares out of 5 grams of yarn, depending on how heavy of the yarn it is. Most of my squares, or most of the 5 gram balls, I can get 2 squares out of. But also, it's a great way to get introduced to dyeing your own yarn, because that's how I started getting into dyeing my own yarn. I kept thinking, I'm never going to have enough different yarns to make a blanket. Now, like I said, I've done all these swaps and everything, and I have plenty of yarn now. But I've also done some dyeing. When I first started dyeing, I just broke up a plain skein, a bare skein, up into, I think it was 20 mini skeins of 5 grams. And I just dyed each one separately and then made all kinds of different colors. So that was a lot of fun, and it really opened my mind up to, Cody's trying to play with the blanket, that's why I keep moving it. It really opened my mind up to the whole dyeing process. Excuse me. And I've really enjoyed it, and it's really been a lot of fun, and just to have all of these different squares and to be able to look back and say, oh, I made socks with that. I made a shawl with that, and some of them are from swaps, so I don't really know anything about them, but I can look at the yarn and say, oh, I dyed that yarn right there. And let's see, I made my Magrathea with that yarn right there. I hand spun that yarn and that yarn. And it's just fun to look back at it. Can you please sit down? To look back at the blanket and see this yarn right here I hand dyed, and then I made a shawl with. It's fun. I love it. I love this project. It's just a small little thing that I can just keep growing and growing and growing and just have fun with it. So I hope you will try this project, and I hope you have fun with it as well.